Private Emma Cortez had dreamed of serving her country since she was 8 years old, watching her grandfather polish his Vietnam War medals at the kitchen table in their small Texas home. Now at 23, she stood on Forward Operating Base Rattlesnake in the dusty mountains of Afghanistan, finally living that dream. But dreams, she was learning, looked nothing like reality. The other soldiers in her unit had made their opinions clear from day one. She was too small, too soft, too green. Staff Sergeant Marcus Hendricks was the worst of them, a 15-year veteran with a chest full of ribbons and a heart full of old-school prejudice. He never missed a chance to remind Emma that she didn't belong. "You're gonna get someone killed." "Cortez," he'd say, loud enough for everyone to hear. "This ain't some video game. This is real life, and you're not ready for it." Emma would bite her tongue, keep her head down, and train harder. She scored expert on the rifle range. She could field strip her M4 in under a minute. She ran the morning PT courses faster than half the men in her platoon. But none of it mattered to Hendricks or the others who shared his views. To them, she would always be the rookie who didn't belong. The forward operating base sat in a valley surrounded by brown mountains that looked like crumpled paper under the harsh sun. It housed about 200 soldiers, a mix of infantry, logistics, and support personnel. Emma was part of a quick reaction force, a team that responded to emergencies and supported combat patrols. It was exactly the kind of assignment she'd wanted, the kind that would prove she could handle herself in the field. 3 weeks into her deployment, that chance came. The morning started like any other. Emma was checking her gear when Lieutenant Sarah Chen called the squad together. Chen was one of the few people on base who treated Emma with respect, maybe because she'd faced her own share of doubt as one of the few female officers in combat arms. "We've got a routine patrol," Chen explained, pointing to a map. "Village sweep about 10 clicks north. Intelligence says it's quiet, but stay sharp. Cortez, you're with us." Emma felt her heart jump. This would be her first real patrol outside the wire, her first real mission. She nodded, trying to look calm even though her hands were shaking as she loaded her magazines. Hendricks, standing nearby, let out a short laugh. "Great. Babysitting duty." "Can it, Hendricks?" Chen said sharply. "She's qualified, and she's going." End of discussion. They rolled out an hour later in a convoy of 3 Humvees, dust billowing behind them like smoke. Emma sat in the back of the second vehicle, her rifle held tight across her chest, watching the landscape roll by. Mountains rose on either side of the dirt road, dotted with scattered rocks and sparse vegetation. In the distance, she could see the village, a cluster of mud brick buildings that looked ancient and worn. The patrol started smoothly. They moved through the village in a standard pattern, soldiers spreading out to talk with locals while others maintained security. The villagers seemed used to these visits, neither friendly nor hostile, just tired. Children watched from doorways. Old men sat in the shade and smoked. Emma was posted on a corner with another private named Davis, a quiet guy from Montana who didn't talk much but didn't give her grief either. They stood in the hot sun, scanning their sectors like they'd been trained to do. Then everything changed in an instant. The explosion came from the north end of the village, a deep boom that Emma felt in her chest before she heard it. Black smoke rose into the sky. Her radio erupted with voices all talking at once. "IED. ID on the North Road. 2 vehicles hit. We've got casualties. Contact right. Contact right." The sharp crack of gunfire followed, echoing off the mud walls. Emma's training should have kicked in. She should have moved to cover, assessed the situation, returned fire if needed. That's what all those hours of drills had prepared her for. But she didn't move. Her body locked up like someone had thrown a switch. Her mind went blank, white and empty. The sounds of battle seemed to come from far away, muffled and unreal. She stood there, frozen, while Davis dropped into a firing position and started calling out targets. "Cortez! Get down, get to cover!" Davis was shouting, but Emma couldn't make her legs work. Someone grabbed her vest from behind and yanked her hard to the ground behind a low wall. It was Lieutenant Chen, her face urgent but not angry. "Stay down. Stay here," Chen ordered, then moved off toward the fighting. Emma crouched behind that wall for what felt like hours but was probably 10 minutes. The firefight raged around her. She heard commands being shouted, boots pounding past her position, the zip and crack of bullets hitting nearby, and she just stayed there, shaking, unable to do anything but make herself small. By the time the shooting stopped, the insurgents had pulled back. 2 soldiers were wounded from the IED, but everyone was alive. The squad regrouped and loaded up for the return to base. Emma barely remembered the ride back. She sat in numb silence while Hendricks, in the front seat, made sure everyone knew what had happened. "Rookie froze solid," he said, his voice dripping with disgust. "Just stood there like a deer in headlights. Davis had to cover her sector and his own. Could have gotten people killed." No one spoke up in her defense. Even Chen, who'd been kind before, just looked tired and disappointed. Back at the base, the story spread like wildfire. By evening chow, everyone knew. Emma Cortez, the girl who'd been so determined to prove herself, had frozen in her first real contact. In a combat zone, there was no worse label than coward. Emma sat alone in her bunk that night, staring at the ceiling. She replayed those moments over and over in her mind. The explosion, the gunfire, and her complete inability to move. Everything she'd worked for, every dream she'd had, felt like it was crumbling. She'd let down her unit. She'd let down herself. Maybe Hendricks was right. Maybe she didn't belong here after all. The days that followed were the worst of Emma's life. The other soldiers didn't have to say anything. Their silence said it all. When she walked into the dining facility, conversation stopped. When she joined her squad for training, people found reasons to work with someone else. Even Davis, who'd been neutral before, kept his distance. Hendricks, of course, wasn't silent at all. "There goes Freeze Frame," he'd announce whenever Emma passed. The nickname caught on quickly. Some of the guys thought it was hilarious. Others just shook their heads like she was a sad case not worth their time. Emma thought about requesting a transfer, maybe to a support role away from combat. That's what everyone expected, what they probably wanted, but something stubborn in her refused to quit. Her grandfather hadn't raised her to run away from hard things. She started volunteering for every duty no one else wanted. Guard shifts in the middle of the night, cleaning details, equipment maintenance, anything to show she was still committed, still trying. But the label stuck to her like oil. Lieutenant Chen called her in for a meeting 1 week after the incident. The lieutenant's office was a small plywood cube with a desk, 2 chairs, and a fan that barely worked. Chen gestured for Emma to sit. "How are you holding up?" Chen asked. "I'm fine, ma'am," Emma lied. Chen studied her for a long moment. "What happened out there, Cortez? Your training scores are excellent. You're physically capable, so what went wrong?" Emma had asked herself that question 1,000 times. "I don't know, ma'am. It was like my brain and my body disconnected. I've never felt anything like that before." "It's called an acute stress reaction," Chen said. "It happens. More often than people admit. The human body isn't designed for combat. It takes time to override those freeze instincts. Everyone thinks I'm a coward." "I know," Chen said, and Emma appreciated that she didn't try to deny it. "The only way to change that is to get back out there. I'm putting you on the next patrol rotation." Emma's stomach dropped. "Ma'am, I'm not asking, Private. You either face this now, or it defines you for the rest of your career, maybe for the rest of your life." Chen's voice softened slightly. "I believe you're stronger than you think. But you need to believe it too." The next patrol was scheduled for 3 days later. Emma spent that time in a fog of dread. She barely slept, barely ate. When she closed her eyes, she saw herself freezing again. Saw her squad members dying because she couldn't move. The nightmares were vivid and relentless. The morning of the patrol, she threw up twice before formation. Her hands shook so badly she could barely get her gear on. Hendricks watched her struggle with her vest straps and laughed. "This should be good. Maybe we should put her in the middle vehicle where she can't mess up too bad." Chen ignored him. "Standard route patrol. We're checking the mountain road east of here. Supply convoy is coming through tomorrow and we need to make sure it's clear. Eyes sharp, everyone." They rolled out under a sky that was the color of bleached bone. Emma was in the last Humvee this time, positioned as the rear gunner. It was actually a position of responsibility, but she knew it was also where she could do the least damage if she froze again. The road climbed into the mountains, winding between steep slopes of loose rock and sparse brush. Emma scanned her sector, the valley behind them, watching for any sign of movement or disturbance. The routine of it was almost calming. Watch, scan, check. Watch, scan, check. They were about an hour out when the lead vehicle's commander called a halt. Chen's voice came over the radio. "Possible IED marker spotted. Everyone dismount and hold position while EOD takes a look." EOD, Explosive Ordnance Disposal, the bomb experts. Emma felt her chest tighten. This was already too similar to last time. The soldiers dismounted and took up defensive positions along the road. Emma found herself behind a large boulder, her rifle up, trying to control her breathing. Her heart was pounding so hard she thought everyone could probably hear it. Sergeant First Class Williams, the EOD tech, moved forward with his detection equipment. He was a calm, methodical man who disarmed more bombs than Emma could count. She watched him work, slowly sweeping the road where someone had spotted disturbed dirt, a possible sign of a buried explosive. Minutes ticked by like hours. The sun beat down mercilessly. Sweat ran down Emma's back under her body armor. She kept scanning her sector, forcing herself to focus on the basics. Look for movement. Look for shapes that don't belong. Look for anything unusual. That's when she saw it. High up on the slope to the west, maybe 200 meters away, there was a glint of light. Just a tiny flash, there and gone. Emma's first instinct was to ignore it, to assume it was nothing. After all, who was she to spot something? She was freeze-frame, the rookie who couldn't handle pressure. But the flash came again, and this time Emma recognized it. Sunlight on glass, or on a scope. Spotter, she whispered to herself. Then louder, to the sergeant near her. I think I see someone on the ridge. The sergeant, a guy named Morrison, glanced up briefly. Probably a goat herder. No, Sergeant, I really think... Another flash. And this time Emma saw movement. Someone shifting position. Her mind was suddenly very clear. If there was a spotter on that ridge watching them, then the IED marker might be a setup, a way to get them stopped and clustered together, which meant there might be shooters in position, which meant they were about to be ambushed. Emma made a decision. She keyed her radio, knowing she might be wrong, knowing she might be about to embarrass herself again, but knowing that if she was right and said nothing, people could die. All units, this is Cortez. I have possible enemy spotter on the west ridge. 200 meters. I think this might be an ambush setup. There was a moment of silence on the radio. She could almost feel the eye rolls, the dismissive thoughts. The rookie who freezes is now seeing things too. Then Lieutenant Chen's voice came through, calm and professional. Location, Cortez? Emma described the position as precisely as she could. Chen didn't acknowledge whether she believed it or not. She just said, Williams, hold position. Everyone else increased dispersion. Eyes on that ridge. For 10 seconds, nothing happened. Emma started to doubt herself. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe she was just jumpy, paranoid, making things up to try to redeem herself. Then the mountain erupted with gunfire. Muzzle flashes sparked from at least 6 positions along the ridge, exactly where Emma had spotted the glint. Bullets kicked up dirt across the road and pinged off the Humvees. The soldiers immediately returned fire, but they weren't clustered together like they would have been without Emma's warning. They were spread out in cover, ready. Contact west. Contact west. Someone was shouting, but the squad was already moving, already responding. Emma dropped behind her boulder and aimed toward the ridge. This time there was no freeze. Her body moved on instinct, on training. She acquired a target, a muzzle flash behind a rock outcropping, and squeezed off controlled bursts. She couldn't tell if she hit anything, but the fire from that position stopped. Cortez Morrison suppressed that northern position. Chen's voice was steady despite the chaos. Emma shifted her aim, found the position, and fired. Beside her, Morrison was doing the same. The coordinated fire forced the shooter to duck down. Chen was maneuvering the rest of the squad, setting up a proper defensive line. It was Sergeant Williams, the EOD tech, who was in the most danger. He was caught in the open on the road, too far from good cover. Rounds were impacting all around him as he tried to low-crawl back toward the vehicles. Emma saw what was about to happen before it did. One of the shooters on the ridge had shifted position and had a clear angle on Williams. She could see the barrel starting to track toward him. She didn't think. She just moved. Emma broke from cover and sprinted toward Williams, firing as she ran to keep the shooter's head down. It was tactically insane, the kind of thing that gets you killed. But Williams had a wife and 2 daughters whose pictures he showed everyone. Emma wasn't going to watch him die. She reached Williams and grabbed his vest, hauling him toward the nearest Humvee. Bullets snapped past them so close she felt the pressure wave. Morrison and 2 others were laying down covering fire, shouting at her to move faster. They made it behind the Humvee just as a burst of fire tore through the space they'd been occupying a second before. Williams was breathing hard, his eyes wide. You're crazy. Cortez, he gasped. Yeah, probably. Emma agreed, checking to make sure he wasn't hit. The firefight lasted another 5 minutes before the insurgents broke contact and withdrew into the mountains. No one pursued. That was a good way to run into a secondary ambush. The squad regrouped, checked for casualties, and secured the area. Miraculously, no one was seriously hurt. A few minor wounds from rock fragments, some torn equipment, but everyone was alive. As the adrenaline faded, Emma started to shake again. But this time it was just the normal aftermath of combat, not the paralysis she'd felt before. Lieutenant Chen approached her, her expression unreadable. That was either very brave or very stupid, Cortez. Maybe both. Yes, ma'am, Emma said, not sure which response was expected. But you spotted them first. Your warning gave us time to spread out. Chen paused. If we'd been clustered around that IED marker when they opened up, we'd have casualties right now. Serious ones. The weight of that settled over Emma. She'd been right. Her warning had mattered. Williams came over, still dusting himself off. You saved my life, Private. I won't forget that. Emma nodded, not trusting herself to speak. The squad mounted up and headed back to base. This time the ride was different. People looked at her differently. Not with contempt or pity, but with something like respect. Back at FOB Rattlesnake, the story spread just as fast as the first one had. But this version was better. The rookie who'd frozen had spotted an ambush and saved lives. She'd pulled a man to safety under fire. She'd found her courage when it mattered most. Not everyone was convinced. Hendricks, predictably, found ways to downplay it. She got lucky, he told anyone who'd listen. Saw a flash and happened to be right. Doesn't erase the fact that she's a liability. But his words had less power now. The other soldiers had seen what Emma could do. More importantly, Emma had seen it herself. The freeze hadn't been cowardice. It had been a moment of human reaction, and she'd overcome it. Chen recommended her for a commendation. Nothing major, just a certificate of achievement, but it meant something. It was official recognition that she'd done her job well. 2 weeks later, Emma was back to regular patrol rotations, fully integrated into the squad. Davis started eating meals with her again. Morrison asked her opinion on gear setups. Even some of Hendricks' allies began to thaw. Then came the mission that would change everything. Intelligence had identified a compound in the mountains where a high-value target was supposedly meeting with local insurgent leaders. A special operations team was going to hit it, and they needed a quick reaction force on standby in case things went sideways. Emma's squad got the call. They staged at a checkpoint about a mile from the target compound, waiting in the dark while the operators went in. Emma sat in the Humvee, checking her gear for the 10th time, listening to the radio chatter. The hit was supposed to be quick and clean. Get in, grab the target, get out, but nothing ever goes exactly as planned. Contact. We have heavy contact. The radio exploded with traffic. The special operations team had hit the compound and found way more fighters than expected. They were pinned down, taking fire from multiple buildings. They had wounded. They needed help now. Mount up. We're rolling, Chen shouted. The quick reaction force roared toward the compound. Emma's heart pounding, but her mind clear. This was what they trained for. This was why they were here. They arrived to find the compound lit up with tracer fire, looking like deadly fireworks. The special operations team had taken cover in one building but was surrounded. The insurgents were in at least 3 other structures, and more were reportedly coming from a nearby village. Chen's squad dismounted and immediately started taking fire. The situation was chaos, bullets everywhere, shouting, explosions. Emma moved with her fire team toward a position where they could support the pinned operators. That's when she heard it. A sound that made her blood run cold. Children crying. Through a broken window of one of the buildings, Emma could see movement. Small shapes huddled in a corner. The building wasn't one the insurgents were firing from. It was caught in between, taking rounds from both sides. "Lieutenant," Emma called out. "There are civilians in that structure." "Kids," Chen looked, cursed. "How many?" "I can't tell. At least a few." The building's wall was getting chewed up by gunfire. It wouldn't provide cover much longer. If those children stayed there, they'd be killed. But reaching them meant crossing open ground under fire. Chen looked around, calculating odds, trying to figure out how to save everyone. Emma knew what she had to do. "I can get to them," Emma said. Chen turned to her, and for a moment they just looked at each other. Emma could see the lieutenant calculating, weighing the risk against the potential outcome. "You'll never make it across that open ground," Chen said, but her tone suggested she was trying to convince herself as much as Emma. "There's a drainage ditch that runs most of the way," Emma pointed out. She'd spotted it when they'd first arrived. Just a shallow depression in the ground, but it was something. "If Morrison and Davis can give me covering fire, I can use it to get close." "And then what? You carry out a bunch of kids while people are shooting at you? Better than leaving them to die, ma'am." Williams, the EOD tech Emma had saved, had joined them. "I'll go with her. 2 of us can move faster with multiple kids." Chen looked at them both for a long moment. Emma could see the burden of command in her eyes. She was being asked to approve a mission that could get 2 of her soldiers killed, but she was also being asked to save innocent children. "Do it," Chen finally said. "But you stay low, you move fast, and if it gets too hot, you abort." "That's an order." Emma and Williams moved to the edge of their cover. Morrison and Davis positioned themselves to provide suppressing fire. Emma took a deep breath, checked her rifle one more time, and nodded to Williams. "Go." They sprinted for the drainage ditch as Morrison and Davis opened up, pouring fire toward the insurgent positions. Emma slid into the shallow depression, which was barely deep enough to provide cover, and started crawling as fast as she could. Williams was right behind her. Bullets snapped overhead. Dirt kicked up around them. Emma focused on moving forward inch by inch, using elbows and knees to drag herself along. The 50 meters to the building felt like 50 miles. They reached the wall, pressed themselves against it, and caught their breath. The crying was louder now, mixed with adult voices speaking in Pashto. Emma couldn't understand the words, but the terror in them was universal. "Windows too high," Williams said. "We need to go through the door." The door was around the corner, partially exposed to one of the insurgent positions. Emma peeked around, assessed the angles, and made a decision. "I'll go first. Cover me." She didn't wait for an argument. She just moved, darting around the corner to the door. A burst of fire came from her left, but it was high. She reached the door and tried it. "Locked. Open up." "American soldiers!" she shouted, pounding on the wood. The door cracked open and a terrified woman's face appeared. Emma didn't need to speak her language. She just gestured urgently, showing her hands were friendly, indicating the woman should bring the children. The woman hesitated only a second before pulling the door wider. Emma saw what they were dealing with. 7 children, ranging from about 3 years old to maybe 12, and 2 women. 9 people total. "We're getting you out of here," Emma said, knowing her tone would communicate even if the words didn't. She turned to Williams. "How do we do this?" Williams looked at the distance back to friendly lines, then at the 9 people they needed to move. "The drainage ditch won't work with this many. We'll have to move fast across open ground. Carry the little ones, make the older ones run between us." Emma keyed her radio. "Chen, we have 9 civilians. 7 children, 2 adults. We're going to need heavy covering fire for extraction." "Copy that," Chen responded. "I'll coordinate. When you hear the RPG, that's your signal to move." Emma positioned the group. She picked up the smallest child, a little girl who couldn't have been more than 3. Williams took another small one. They put the 2 women and 4 older children between them. Then they heard the whoosh of the rocket-propelled grenade. It slammed into the insurgent position with a blast that lit up the night. "Run! Go, go, go!" Emma shouted. They burst from the building and ran toward friendly lines. The squad was pouring everything they had at the insurgents, creating a wall of suppressing fire. But some rounds still came back. Emma heard them cracking past, felt the little girl in her arms bury her face against her shoulder. One of the older boys stumbled and fell. Williams grabbed him, hauled him up, and kept moving. One of the women was limping but didn't slow down. 30 meters, 20, 10. They reached the American position and practically fell behind cover. Friendly hands grabbed the civilians and pulled them to safety. Emma set down the little girl, who immediately ran to one of the women. Chen appeared beside her. "Everyone okay?" Emma nodded, too out of breath to speak. She looked back at the 9 people they'd just saved. 9 lives that would have been lost in the crossfire. The children were crying but alive. The women were holding them close, rocking them, whispering comfort. The special operations team managed to break contact shortly after, and the combined force withdrew. The quick reaction force and the rescued civilians made it back to the checkpoint, then to the fob. As the adrenaline faded, Emma started to shake again. This time, Williams put a hand on her shoulder, You did good, Private. Real good. The story of what Emma had done spread through the base like wildfire, but this time it reached beyond just her unit. The Special Operations Team commander, a serious captain with 20 years in, sought her out personally to thank her. The rescued civilians were processed and taken to a safe location, but before they left, the woman Emma had first seen at the door approached her with the little girl. Through an interpreter, the woman said, "You are very brave. You saved my granddaughter. I will pray for you every day." Emma felt tears sting her eyes. "I was just doing my job, ma'am," the woman smiled. "No, you did more than a job. You saw us. You didn't have to, but you saw us and you came." After they left, Emma found herself called to the battalion commander's office. Lieutenant Colonel Hayes was a stern-faced officer who Emma had never spoken to directly. She stood at attention in front of his desk, wondering what she'd done wrong. "At ease, Private," Hayes said. "Do you know why you're here?" "No, sir." "You're here because in the last 3 weeks you've gone from being considered a liability to being one of the soldiers people specifically ask for." He pulled out a file. "Lieutenant Chen submitted a commendation for the ambush you spotted. The Special Operations Team commander submitted a recommendation for your actions during the compound rescue. And I received a message from higher headquarters about 9 civilians whose lives were saved by an Army private who refused to leave them behind." Emma didn't know what to say, so she stayed silent. Hayes stood up and came around the desk. "I've been doing this for a long time, Cortez. I've seen a lot of soldiers. Most do their jobs adequately. Some exceed expectations, and a very few become the kind of person others want beside them when things get bad. You're becoming that kind of soldier." "Thank you, sir. I'm recommending you for the Army Commendation Medal with Valor device," Hayes continued. "And I'm putting you in for the Battalion Soldier of the Quarter Board. I think you should know that Staff Sergeant Hendricks will be one of the evaluators." Emma felt her stomach drop slightly at that, but she nodded. "I understand, sir. I suspect you'll do just fine," Hayes said with the hint of a smile. The board took place 2 weeks later. Emma stood in her dress uniform, polished and pressed in front of a panel of senior non-commissioned officers. Hendricks sat at the end of the table, his expression unreadable. They asked her questions about Army regulations, tactics, leadership. She answered as best she could, her voice steady. At the end, they asked the standard final question, "Why do you deserve to be Soldier of the Quarter?" Emma thought about all the expected answers. She could talk about her performance, her awards, her actions, but instead she told them the truth. "I don't know if I deserve it, sergeants," she said. "A few weeks ago I froze in combat. I let down my team and myself. I could stand here and make excuses, but the truth is I failed. What I learned from that failure is that being a good soldier isn't about never being afraid or never making mistakes. It's about what you do after. It's about getting back up, getting back out there, and doing the job even when you're terrified. That's what I've tried to do. If that makes me Soldier of the Quarter, then I'm honored. If it doesn't, then I'll keep working until I get there." The board members exchanged glances. Hendricks was looking down at his papers. They dismissed her and deliberated. Emma waited outside, her heart pounding. Win or lose, she'd told the truth. When they called her back in, the board president, a command sergeant major with 30 years of service, stood up. "Private Cortez, the board has made its decision. You are selected as Soldier of the Quarter for this battalion." Emma felt a rush of emotion but kept her composure. "Thank you, Sergeant Major." As she turned to leave, Hendricks spoke up. "Cortez, one moment." She turned back, uncertain. Hendricks stood, and for the first time since she'd met him, he didn't look angry or dismissive. He looked uncomfortable, like he was about to do something difficult. "I owe you an apology," he said. The other board members looked surprised. Emma was stunned. "I judged you before you had a chance to prove yourself. I made your life harder than it needed to be. That was wrong." He paused. "You're a good soldier. Better than good. I'd be proud to have you on my team." Emma didn't know what to say. Finally, she managed, "Thank you, Staff Sergeant. That means a lot." He nodded and she was dismissed. 3 months later, Emma's deployment ended and she rotated back to the United States. She'd received her Commendation Medal, her Soldier of the Quarter award, and something more valuable than either, the respect of her peers and the knowledge that she could face her fears and overcome them. The night before she left Afghanistan, Lieutenant Chen pulled her aside. "You know what you taught me, Cortez," Chen said. "Ma'am, that the measure of a soldier isn't whether they freeze in battle. It's what they do next. You froze and then you saved 12 lives. The 2 operators who would have been hit in that ambush without your warning. Williams, who you pulled to safety. And the 9 civilians you risked everything to rescue. 12 lives because you didn't let one bad moment define you. Emma felt tears threatening but blinked them back. I just didn't want to be that person anymore. The one who froze. You never were just that person, Chen said. You just needed to see what everyone else finally saw. A soldier who cares more about others than herself. That's the kind of person who becomes a hero. As Emma boarded the plane that would take her home, she thought about how far she'd come from that terrified rookie who'd stood frozen on a village street. She'd learned that courage wasn't the absence of fear. It was the decision to act despite the fear. The little girl from the compound, the one she'd carried to safety, had given her a bracelet before leaving. Emma wore it now. A reminder that every action mattered, every choice counted, and that even when you freeze, what you do next can change everything. She'd gone to war as a rookie trying to prove herself. She came home as a soldier, who knew that real strength wasn't about never falling down. It was about getting back up no matter how many times you had to do it, and doing what needed to be done even when you were terrified. That was the real story. Not that she'd frozen in battle, but what she'd done next, and it had saved 12 lives.